Hello everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips. And the topic today is what you need to know about medical devices. And when I started looking into this, I frankly was shocked at what I saw. And for me to be shocked, that's really saying something, because I'm kind of jaded after all the years that I've been looking into medicine and all the things that are wrong with it. Well, here goes. In 2019, a Kaiser Health News investigation discovered that the FDA has maintained a secret database in which injuries and deaths due to several medical devices have been posted. For 20 years, companies posted some of their adverse event reports to what's called the MAUDE database, and that stands for Manufacturer and User Facility Device Experience. That's always been made public. But during the same time, the FDA granted exemptions to device makers that allowed them to funnel many more reports into a secret, quote, alternative summary reporting system, or ASR. The MAUDE database did mention ASR, but most people didn't know what it was, and anybody who tried to gain access to it was told that they should file a Freedom of Information Act request. Now, it can sometimes take years for these requests to be granted, and often lawsuits are required in order to get the FDA or any government agency to come up with the information. And of course, all of this stuff should be open to the public all the time. Well, Kaiser filed a FOIA, what's called a FOIA request, for copies of the exemption agreements granted by the FDA, along with ASR reports for several medical devices. Kaiser was initially told that it might take as long as 2 years to get the information. An appeal was denied, and the reason for the appeal was the FDA claimed that there was no compelling reason to rush the disclosure of this information. Well, that's really not true, because many of the devices covered by the exemption agreements, once the information did become public, were found to cause serious injury and harm. And by withholding the information, it meant that doctors and patients who were using these devices or considering them really couldn't make any type of informed decision, because most of the information that would be necessary was not available. Well, in June of 2019, former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb finally agreed to make public 5.7 million records posted in the ASR. And I have to tell you that the information was startling. This is what I mean by even I was shocked. So here are just a few of the highlights. Over 480,000 injuries and malfunctions were reported in the ASR, the secret database, in 2017 alone, almost 500,000. In 2016, Medtronic, which makes the Covidien surgical stapler, reported only 84 injuries in the public database, but posted thousands of events to the ASR. The stapler, as it turns out, is a terrible product that was linked to 412 deaths and 11,000 injuries and almost 100,000 malfunctions. Devices that carried the most risk tended to report almost exclusively to the ASR. For example, only 10% of the devices tracked by MAUDE are implants, while 44% of those that are reporting to the ASR are implanted devices, which are much more likely to cause harm and to be recalled. Over 2 million reports were filed in the ASR for dental implants alone. There were more events reported for blood glucose meters used by diabetics than any other device, 2.4 million events during the last 20 years. Over 500,000 events were reported for breast implants during that 20-year period as well. In addition to keeping most adverse events secret, the device makers cheated in other ways too. When Kaiser analyzed the ASR data, it was discovered that while each event is supposed to be given a unique ID, system IDs were routinely assigned to more than one event. Even in consideration of this manipulation of the data, Kaiser's report was horrific. 40% of the total adverse events from devices were posted in the ASR instead of being made public, and even with the duplications, there were over 1.1 million of them. Former FDA Commissioner David Kessler defends the FDA's practices. His reasoning, and he was quoted in one of the articles I looked at, he says thousands of injury and death reports were being submitted to FDA every month, and it was, he described, mind-numbing to review the reports individually. So Kessler said he consulted with both the FDA's legal department and the device makers, and the exemption agreement was the result. Assigning repetitive events to one ID number was the efficient thing to do, and God knows efficiency is what we're looking for from regulatory agencies, right? An FDA employee confirmed that the ASR was supposed to be the place to report issues that are already well known and well documented with the FDA, in order to free up FDA employees to spend more time looking at unique adverse events instead of the ones that took place again and again. Now, it seems to me that 1.1 million events that take place again and again and again might deserve some attention, recalls, demands for more research or something, instead of putting it in a secret database. And why wouldn't you make it available to the public, even if your goal was to have FDA officials spend their time on something else? Well, nobody's offered a good explanation for that. And even former FDA Commissioner Dr. Robert Califf says that he knew nothing about it while he was commissioner. The FDA still has not made public all of the ASR data. The data that was disclosed last year, it does not represent the whole thing. At least 1 million adverse events from a 15-year period remain sequestered, and the information is only available to FDA officials. You have to do a FOIA request to get it and go through the court system, and it's a 2-year process. The FDA's favorable and deceptive arrangements with device makers continue today, which is not surprising because they do the same thing for drug companies. Take pelvic mesh, for example, which is used to hold organs in place for women with organ prolapse. Publicly, the FDA issued a warning stating that serious complications were not rare and ordered safety studies. Many mesh makers just took their product off the market as a result. I think that they probably knew that they couldn't really do safety studies that would justify their products. But companies that still make mesh have been granted a special exemption that allows them to file, quote, litigation summary reports. These reports are accompanied by a spreadsheet that might actually list over 1,000 injuries, but the list is filed as a single report. The FDA acknowledges that 8 companies that make mesh have used this exemption to avoid direct reporting of almost 12,000 injuries for the year 2017 alone. So this is a serious issue, this misreporting thing. It really skews the data available to both doctors and patients. The same exemption was given to the company that makes the Da Vinci surgical robots that are used to perform prostatectomy. Hundreds of serious injuries are reported as one event every single year. Device makers can use the same strategy to report deaths caused by their devices in order to disguise the actual risks associated with their products. Edwards Lifesciences makes the Sapiens 3 valve, which is inserted through a blood vessel and implanted in the heart. An Edwards employee acknowledged that the company has filed as many as 297 deaths and 1,800 injuries as single incidents. There's a difference between 1 and 1,800. Allergan used the strategy to hide adverse events and deaths for its breast implants for years and years. Companies can also disguise events with vague language. Madras Tomez, a former FDA employee who now runs a company that analyzes FDA, says that an event due to a breast implant can be reported as a, quote, biocompatibility problem, which can mean anything from the implant needed to be replaced to the person developed lymphoma. In response to all of this, there has been nothing done that moves in the direction of reform. In fact, the FDA has now devised a new system for reporting that makes life even easier for the device makers. FDA has told the makers of at least 5,600 devices that they no longer have to even notify FDA that they're filing summary reports. So they used to have to basically tell FDA, we're going to be filing some fraudulent data, just FYI. Now they can just file the fraudulent data and they don't even have to notify. Well, what does this actually mean to you? Data concerning the risks associated with many devices is not only withheld from the general public, but also from doctors, which means that at this time, your doctor may recommend a device that he or she has a great deal of confidence in that is not based on any factual information, because the actual factual information, a lot of it is still held in a secret database, or it's misrepresented as one event when it's really maybe a couple thousand events. So you should be cautious. Make sure that, first of all, you really need any procedure or device that's recommended to you, and also make sure that you have exhausted every other option that might be available for taking care of your health issue or issues. And whenever possible, insist on a device for which you can find some information. But this just goes to the absolute corruption that's going on in our federal government, which is a business partner. The FDA, in this case, is performing as a business partner of the device makers, not a regulator. And this is something that we have just got to start screaming and hollering about until we make it stop. All right, enough anger for the week. I mean, I've spent a lot of time looking into this, and my blood pressure was up the whole time I did, and it's up now just talking about it. I'm just infuriated at this, and I'm hoping that you are too. All right, that's all for the week. As usual, if you're not a subscriber, hit the subscriber button and do pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it. I'll be back to you next week with more news.